I'm Donovan, and this is SOGO Academics covering functions. It's good to get a grounding in the concept of functions because they show up in any field of study: math, physics, chemistry, engineering, biology, and it's not only limited to math and science. It can show up in sociology, economics, politics. I really mean any field. So you can see how functions help us to understand a wide variety of things in our universe and everyday life. The question becomes, what do functions do and how do we use them?
In general, there's some number that goes into a function, some mathematical magic happens, and then some number comes out. The goal here is to understand the magic trick that's going on inside of functions. And the first step to figuring out the trick is to know what the symbol f of x means. The letter f is basically the name that we label a function with. It's arbitrary. You can label a function anything you want. The function machine could have been called g of x, h of x, capital T of x, beta of x, or even Peter of x. Any label you want. With any function, after the label comes the parentheses. And in the parentheses, there's some letter inside of it. This letter represents the number that enters the input. And just like the label of the function f, this letter can be anything you want. Although you'll usually come across the letters x, y, z, or t. Let's shift our focus back to the case we're dealing with. In this case, the number that enters the input is 3. We know that the letter in the parentheses represents the number that enters the input. We also know that 3 enters the input. Therefore, x is equal to 3. For convenience, instead of writing f of x equals 3, you can just substitute the x for the input number. So in this case, you can substitute x for 3 and write f of 3.
Of course, the input is only half of the story and the other half is the output. In this case, the output value is 20. But how do you get from an input of 3 to an output of 20? Understanding that process is how you come to figure out the magic trick that's going on inside of functions.
Recall that f in f of x is just the arbitrary name or the label we assign to functions. It actually tells us nothing about the function. Much in the same way, Donovan is just an arbitrary name or the label that was assigned to me at birth. It tells you nothing about who I am, what I do, or anything about my identity. The things that give me my identity is my physical body and my personality. In this analogy, the physical body and personality of a function is basically the equation that describes the function. Now that we have an equation for the function, we know its identity and how it behaves. So when 3 gets inserted into the input, we know this means x equals 3. So we can substitute 3 everywhere we see x. The literal way to read this equation is, when the value of x is 3, this function that depends on the value of x is equal to 5 times 3 plus 5, which is the same as 5 parentheses 3 plus 5. It's just different ways to express multiplication. All that's left to do is to solve the equation. The classic mnemonic for solving equations that's commonly used is PEMDAS. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally or Sandra or whatever name that begins with the letter S. The letters actually stand for parentheses, exponents, multiplication and division, and finally addition and subtraction. In this equation, there's only multiplication and addition. M comes before A, so we have to multiply first, then add up the remaining numbers last. This means we multiply 5 times 3 and get 15. Then add 15 plus 5 and get the output value of 20. Of course, this isn't the only equation that would make the statement when x equals 3, f of x equals 20 true. In fact, there are an infinite amount of equations that would make this statement true. I could have chosen f of x equals x squared plus 2x plus 5 and gotten the same result of 20 when 3 is the input. You can try this calculation on your own. Remember to use PEMDAS and prove it to yourself.
I hope you got a great feel for the concept of functions and you already feel like a master at it. This definitely will not be the last time I bring up this topic because, again, it could show up in any field. Stay tuned for the next video where I apply some of these concepts of functions to physics. If you enjoyed the video, please like and share. If you learned something from it, you should definitely like and share. And if you didn't learn anything, but you just want to support me, I'd appreciate that like and share. Thank you for your time and energy. Think scientifically, but more importantly, think critically. I'm Donovan, and this is So Go Academics.